It's your disenfranchisement, ladies and gentlemen. Disenfranchisement. This is one of the most powerful weapons in the world. And if you do not learn to embrace your disenfranchisement, it will be used against you. This is probably the key, I think, to Hitler's success. And the only way that you would have a ripe enough atmosphere to weaponize disenfranchisement is that you would need a liberal left to goat you along the entire time. So in a way, the disenfranchised is made from both sides. The left is telling the white man, be disenfranchised. And the white man is like, I'm disenfranchised. And it's the same kind of phenomenon we have with the ego, where really what's happening is we are ashamed to feel disenfranchised. We're ashamed of it. You could say this is by design, but that's slave talk. That's what slaves say. Wow, this is by design. This is by design. They set it up this way. And that's actually not even true. Turns out that if you feel disenfranchised, but you feel guilty about feeling disenfranchised, you don't actually feel disenfranchised. Not yet. You are a fledgling, right? There are fledges out there. And a lot of them are like ling-a-ding-dinging. They're fledglings. They're having baby fledges. And that these fledglings of disenfranchisement have not learned how to walk. And it's during this time when the disenfranchised are crawling that all of the fascism is up for grabs. All of the meat is there. Anyone who wants to be anyone is going to see a bunch of people on their knees wishing that they had enough energy to be disenfranchised. Do you realize what a luxury it is to have guilt about your disenfranchisement? Do you realize how many extra calories you have to have loaded in your chamber to feel those two emotions at the same time? This is luxury. The Palestinians do not feel guilt for their disenfranchisement. They say Hamas. Hamas. This is a much more righteous reaction to their disenfranchisement. It shows a deeper kind of authenticity that they have when it comes to feeling disenfranchised. I would argue that Hitler's biggest mistake, first of all, Hitler's biggest success was creating a franchise for disenfranchisement. You heard it here first, ladies and gentlemen. He created a franchise of disenfranchisement. And the worst mistake he made was expecting that everyone who felt disenfranchised actually had the ka to do it. Actually had the Bullocks, had the Sandras, had two Cassandras down there in your pantsas, walking around going, we ain't no yoga pants. We got some franchises down here. And this power to feel disenfranchised is really the fatherland that could only crawl. It's a fatherland that could only briefly pull itself up long enough to realize it didn't have what it takes. And that's where Hitler failed. He believed in his own propaganda. So what was the real problem there? Well, if you're feeling disenfranchised, but you don't have enough cojones to franchise yourself, you will go to a McDonald's somewhere else and have that franchisement feed you. And you will create a one-party solution, a singular solution that solves it all. And you will take the very fine tuning that the left gave you. I bet you're wondering, is he talking about America or Germany? I'm talking about the same thing. They are the same thing in this one little way of disenfranchisement. They're the same. And so you would need a left that's constantly pushing you to have less ego for you to start to feel the pull of, man, I wish I could have more ego. I wish I could have more ego, and all of us would be singing in the middle of the day. And that this is coming, and a lot of you are like, fucking, I hate musicals, so you're like, we have to suppress the ego. And it's a good time that a bunch of ancient rock humpers, Ashera poles, were humping holes in the stone and dropping their seed and creating the first sacred horrors that gave birth to everything that is happening to you today. Welcome to Tuesday. My name's James True. You were listening to James True Live, and you should hit the subscribe button. You should do that. It's kind of like, it's fucking free. Jesus, guys. Fuck. You could hit like, too. You could join Patreon. All those are free. All of those things are free. We had a wonderful discussion last night. Went into a lot more detail about a lot of interesting things. It's called Dojo. Check it out on Dojo Worth. That free episode, you can see the link on Patreon. It's right there. But let's talk about Ka. I want to talk about Ka. I want to Ka. Well, who said I'm going to be doing that? Sorry, but I want to discuss Ka, and I want you to understand a lot has happened to your Ka. So much has happened to your Ka that you guys don't even know what Ka is. This is, oh, man. Oh, so much has happened to your Ka that you don't. James, stop throwing 666 gang signs. You're not made of carbon. You don't have 3 protons, 3 electrons. You don't have perfect sixes. You don't have the tri-sixa. You can't be going around tapping into the sacred power of 666, James. You're going to get called names. Like the farrier of Lucius. You're going to be called a farrier. Yeah, a farrier. I literally put horseshoes on the bottom of light. I put horseshoes on the bottom of light, motherfuckers. Who among you has been called a farrier of light? Nay. Do you see the nay? Do you see the deep levels of puns that are coming out of this frickin' Taurus? And I'm a Taurus. Jesus, James. Yes, I am. Je suis. Oh my God. We've solved it all. Let's end the show. No, we won't, because we're going to talk about Ka. We're going to talk about it because I want you to know what happened. First, some of you probably think that I'm just like making shit up when I'm telling you about a bunch of rock humpers. And in order to explain Ka, we got to get there. And in order to get there, before we get to Ka, I need to get to the Vatican is full of sex toys. Did you know that? Some of you are like, what's underneath the Vatican? Some of you watched James True, episode 864, and you already know. And don't worry, this is not a show that's strictly repeating that. But if you were paying attention to episode 352 and episode 654, then you guys would be like, oh my God, we're doing a mashup. It's time for a mashup, ladies and gentlemen. And the potatoes are going to be the Vatican's full of sex toys and the Valley of Ka. Let's get started. First of all, we will hide 4,000 stone penisi. What shall we do? Turned out some lesbians were. I'm making up the part that they're lesbians. I please allow me the ability to add one little literary part to this story that I think just kind of makes it cute. I hope you don't mind, okay? And if there are any lesbians in the audience, speak now. Or forever hold your peace. Oh, that was probably a low blow. Forever hold your... James, stop it. Okay, look. Okay, the true part is... Yeah, the true part here is that archaeologists were in Rome and they were digging under a giant urinal. And Urinals are pretty gross, unless they're like 4,000 years old. And then when they're like 4,000 years old, no, okay, not 4,000. I'm exaggerating. 3,000, 2,500 years old, right? 2,500. James, get with it. 2,000 to 2,200-year-old urinal. 222. This is P. No, wait, that's 1. Never mind. The urinal's full of like stuff. And they're studying it, and they sent 2 lesbians to study it. And these 2 lesbians are in the urinal, and they're like cleaning stuff up, and they're like, "Oh my God, I found something!" And they pull it up, and it's a phallus, and they're like, I think you found a phallus." One lesbian says to the other, and she's like, "Oh well, as an archaeologist, I can't find this disgusting. As a lesbian, I can't find this disgusting. This is clearly an academic, scholarly thing, so I will put it over here and tag it." And then she's like, "Oh, that was close." And then she looks down, and there's another phallus there. She holds her line. She does her sacred duty. She picks this up, and she bags it, and she puts it over there. Then she sees another one. This happens 4,000 times, ladies and gentlemen. 4,000, actually it's 3,999 of these 4,000 phalluses were logged in a book found underneath a urinal. One is missing. For some reason, the lesbians didn't account for that. We asked them, "Hey, why is there a missing stone phalluses and phallusi?" And they're just like, you need to count again. You need to count. Look, I gotta go, but you need to count, and I gotta get on my plane. Got a lot of baggage to check. Don't need to be sitting here recounting a bunch of penises. Plus, I'm a lesbian. Don't make me count 3,900. Well, didn't you say 4,000? No, I gotta go. So that's that's one part. Now that I've gotten my perversion joke out of the way, this is going to get more perverted. So this doesn't actually happen. But I want you to know that what's underneath Rome, what the Vatican is hiding, is actually just a bunch of shame sex toys. And the reason why they're shamey sex toys is because your religion itself, the religion that came to you, came about through the idea of humping on a pole. The Asherah pole is an ancient concept. It's some would say that it predates Yahweh. Others who kind of understand Yahweh more maybe would even understand that really it's just a combination of both. That the Asherah pole joined forces with Yahweh. Yahweh incorporated it. In fact, Yahweh, if you open the doors of a Torah, it would say she, he, and then there's all this transsexual stuff. And then there's the Cave of the Patriarchs, truly probably considered the second most guarded relic in Jewish lore is the Cave of the Patriarchs. And inside of there are supposed to be the bones of Isaac and Jacob and whatnot. And if you've been watching the stream, you know they probably have 6 fingers and 6 toes. I'm just saying that this is probably why they were considered such a relic. And as time moved on, I think that they discovered that they actually were hermaphroditic bones. And I know that this all sounds crazy, but it really doesn't when you start to understand what ancient church was. This is an overview of the Vatican, and you can see on the left is the tomb of St. Peter. But there's something underneath St. Peter, something underneath this spot. And this place underneath St. Peter has a darker history. And the history is the birth of a religion that I'd like to call Priapus. I didn't invent the name, but I've seen others use this. James Hannay, for example, is one. James Hannay Smith, Byantine. I'm gonna have to put this book in the show notes. You're gonna love this book though. But these guys coined the phrase Priapus, and Priapus would be basically a sort of pagan, almost proto-pagan worship of the phallus itself. And if you look at ancient Greek rituals. In fact, I don't know, I bet you I don't actually have this, but if you remember, one of the ancient Greek festivals that I've shown you is this old Greek ritual where these chicks are greasing a pole. They're spreading sacred olive oil on a pole. And guys, this is kind of all the proof you need of what ancient religion was really like. And you don't have to call me a pervert to say that. I think some of you guys are going to just say, James, I think you're a pervert, but this, you cannot use this as an example. You should be able to hear this. Okay, I will admit that I've added the music, but you're actually looking at one of the most respected museums in Greece, reenacting in the most historical way possible the ancient ritual of the pole. I did add the music, I admit it. Yeah, baby. You get it. Oh, look. There's something going on here, guys. Mm. Oh my God, she's gonna put some... Conjuring. That's right, Conjuring. You guys get it. It's actually not a joke, though. It's actually not a joke. I mean, it's funny. I hope you found that funny. But this is a traditional Delphi Lingam olive oil ritual. And it's only one of many, many examples. And if you really want to tap into the birth of religion, some of you may have struggled like I had at a young age when I'm like, how would a bunch of primitive guys wandering around the desert decide to start something as sophisticated as religion? It meaning that they would like, oh, let's build a church and everyone act really clean and everyone just like sit there and go, oh, and like repeat stuff and then be like, oh, we're practicing ritual. Because everyone explained to me in history, well, this was a ritual. This was a ritual. It was a ritual. And that was their explanation for fucking everything. You'd be like, well, but why would they do this? Like, and when you look at it, if you look at this ritual without the music, you're seeing it as cleansed as it can possibly be. And you may end up wondering, like I have, is why would that catch on? Baptism is a perfect example. We've talked about this. The only thing that really makes sense about baptism would be it was some kind of adrenaline ritual, because if you're going to be reborn, you would have to think you're going to die. And if you needed a bunch of your brothers to hold you down underwater, this would instill a sense of death. The death itself would release the DMT to give you an epiphycal experience. And that epiphycal experience could be used to cleanse and outmodulate the trauma or shame of anything else that's still in your system. Whether it be the time you bashed your friend Abel with a rock, whether it be the time that you raped some woman named Ophelia, or the time that you were raped as a young boy in the middle of dinner. These things would be in your system, and you'd be looking for some kind of religio, some sort of ritual practice, a medicine, a kind of pharmakos to escape the pain and terror of everything that had happened to you. And if your consciousness was just coming online, if you were living in a city where fish paste was a staple of everyone's life, you'd be getting these nutrients that would allow this tumor to grow enough to develop the concept of shame, the power to regret, the wishful escape from things like gluttony or lust. And you would find that these previous worship of the stroking of the pole would no longer appeal to you. And you would seek sanctity and grace because it burned when you peed. that the syphilis itself would create a new kind of Christianity. But I'm getting off track. Let's go back to the pole humping a bit. All of you have heard of the Asherah pole. All of you have heard in the Bible there is we must tear down the Asherah pole. We must destroy it. And this is some of the earliest forms of outrage against pornography. That the displaying of a pole in the woods as serving a temple is telling you something. Ladies and gentlemen, excuse me, most of the Bible references swearing on the phallus, swearing on a megalith, or worshiping some kind of stone. And if there was a stone that held a certain shape, that had certain holes, if there was a pole that had certain holes, and if you were to come up to this pole and the pole was to suddenly turn you on, guys, looking at you, and that you were so turned on by this pole that something would become engorged, because it'd be great if this episode would still be monetized, because a lot of you guys don't hit subscribe, but that you would become engorged, and you would approach the pole, and the animism of your simple psychology would take over, and you would become beast-like because of your engorgement. And your engorgement would be satiated by the pole because you would hump it. And you would see a religion of people that are humping this pole, and this would be the cult of Asherah. And the second that someone else came to the pole, no pun intended, and saw that someone else was humping the pole, the idea would be probably so contagious that the pole would become a limbic omphalos in the area, meaning a place where civilization would form simply around the arousal of the brain of the constellations of things that were happening at the Asherah. The Asherah would become a temple before anyone knew what temple meant. It would become a place where men would turn into sexual beings. And when they were finished, they would feel resolved. Their quest for immortality would be satiated temporarily. The engorgement that occupied them would act as a kind of eraser on the chalkboard, and you would be able to clear all of the trauma that happened to you last Tuesday and just get your rocks off. Just hump that pole. And you would find that people would start swearing on this pole because it would absolve them of things. That the absolution came from the release of the sacred light cake. The combination of juices inside of you, some that you do not see until you enter into this animalistic arousal, would serve as a kind of sacred place. And let's not forget the women. Because the women would notice that there's this pole, and that around this pole is a strong magnetic field of engorged men. And the women could come to this pole and offer their alms and feel the power of having a stargate between their legs, and that power would be worshipped, venerated, and maybe even under certain circumstances kept safe. I'm using safe here in the terms of predictable. Predicticality gives civilization its wings. The ability to predict when the next impropriety occurs, believe it or not, would give you a sort of psychological stability. Additionally, you'd probably find food. You'd probably find shelter. You'd probably find camaraderie. All of these things would exist around something as simple as a hole in a tree. And that as the Asherah poles are found, you're noticing this is a nodular technology that's springing up in different places. And some places have bigger poles than others. You know what I'm saying, ladies? And that some of these poles would actually be rocks. And upon this rock I shall build my church. And that church will be buried in the shame of thousands of Asherahs that you could keep in your pocket. And that the church itself would be built on the pure masturbatory nature of people itself. And the reason why churches, especially Catholicism, has pedophilia is because the very foundation of Peter itself is the worshiping of the phallus on the sacred rock. That one would find their sacred phallus, their engorgement, by visiting the sacred rock. Sex itself would become a kind of Mecca, a Hajj into ecstasy. These are just some of those Priapus items, and Prince Andrew was very captivated by them. This is actually in the Vatican. These are some of these items. And that this is a very, very engorged Priapus. And that this phallus in the lupanar, found in this mosaic at 79 CE, this wall painting, mural. Hey, Merle, get over here. What? Stop calling me you. It's Merle. My name's Merle. And that there's a reason why the beds in the lupanar aren't beds. Guys, this is a bench. This is a poking bench. It's a pinch. It's a bench for getting on your knees. It's a bench for worshiping the sacred whore that you hope is a sacred virgin. You hope it's a sacred virgin. And most of psychology, most of civilization was built around sex. It required sex to build it, and it still does. Churches require sex for you to be there. They're fertility cults. This is St. Paul's Pillar. This is one of them. This is a masturbation rock. And you would find this masturbation rock and start humping it. And the people around you would probably cheer. They would probably cheer. They'd go, dude, you really had a good Priapus going. They would watch you manifest the power of Priapus. That's all. They would see it rise. Then we have the idea of Medusa. The Gorgons, the most beautiful maidens in the Mediterranean, kept as sacred whores, tokens given out to sailors who would come see the sacred whore. And when they would see the sacred whore, they'd find crabs and gonorrhea and syphilis. And it turns out the temple virgins weren't so virginical. That's right, virginical. You heard it here first. Virginical. Virginical. And that Medusa itself would become one of the most violent forms of attacking oneself, because it would attack you in the Priapus. And the idea that men would be turned to stone when they see Medusa is so easy now to understand, that men would become engorged by the beauty of Medusa. The engorgement would attack them, which is why her hair is made of snakes. The snaking of the hair is her beauty is biting back at you. She's biting back at you because you are so turned on by her presence. This is the religion before Christianity, before the gospel of lust was written. The Old Testament mentions humping megaliths a lot, but it also mentions swearing on the phallus, and that you would take your hand and place it on the thigh of your patriarch to swear allegiance to him. And this would be you acknowledging the size of his Priapus, the size of his power. So Medusa is the rise of no. Medusa is the rise of abstinence. that STDs, my friends, were Gaia's way of programming the brain to develop the ability of abstinence. And abstinence is truly at the heart of what made Christianity such a revolutionary idea in Rome. Because before this idea came around, everybody was humping rocks. And that was a kind of existence. I want to remind you that every full moon, some sort of massive group, some would say orgy, I think it's probably more just like sanctioned rape would occur. And that giant dildos would be chased through the street decorated with flowers. These are Priapus. And that at the end of the day, they would aim their sights on a maiden, and whoever was caught, and a lot of these were kind of running probably like Friday the 13th. Oh my God, Jason's coming. Oh my God. Oh my God, Jason's coming. Oh my God. It's probably a lot of that, I'm guessing. And that this ritual was necessary because the psyche did not have enough juice to stay online all the time. It needed this kind of release valve. So now you know why the moon's there. It's there to constantly be pumping that action to get you to the other side, to survive enough for you to develop your own taming of the snake. Constantine 307 through 337 AD. This coin is the taming of the snake. It is the acquisition of self-abstention. The ability to say no. That sounded dramatic, but I just couldn't think of the word. Just trying to be honest. So do not set up any wooden Asherah poles beside the altar to build the Lord your God. Meaning, it's not going to work, dude. Look, you're not going to be able to have... It's specific to this, not because there was a war against women. It wasn't the women. They were fighting against it. Guys, it burned when they peed. It burned when they peed. They're going to blame you for that, women. They're going to be like, you did this. You made it burn when I pee because your sacred Medusa lips bit me when I was most vulnerable. And I'm going to send Perseus to fucking kill you because damn, that burns when I pee. And this is all it took to change, to create a new kind of religion. Break down their altars, smash their sacred stones, cut down their Asherim. This is all about, we got to turn Priapus on its knees. And so you lost the old gods. Calvary, what is Calvary? From Latin calva, bald head, ladies and gentlemen, the skull. The skull that comes poking out of the turtleneck sweater that is ancient Rome. The Aramaic word for the place of the skull is Golgotha, which is derived from the Hebrew word Golgotha. Golgotha means the round thing on the top of the body or the skull. Guys, Aphrodite portrayed in different ways throughout the centuries, right? She used to have remember the old days when we could worship 60-breasted Artemis, when we could have this cake and eat it too, back before we even knew when it burned when we peed. That I would even argue that we probably didn't even know that it burned when we peed, that it took so much consciousness to tap into all these limbic circuits that were firing in our brain, one of which is, fuck, that burns, that even become aware of these things is truly the development of the immune system. I've made this argument about leprosy. Leprosy is the lack of self-awareness. It comes down to the decrepit nature that your skin undergoes when you just don't have enough psyche to even think about pruning yourself. That pruning every part of you requires a lot of mental triangulation, that you would have to be able to picture yourself from all sides and recognize, I smell awful. I bet it took centuries to even realize that some of you are wandering around just like pooping in your own legs and you don't even know it smells bad. It takes you years until you finally discover, I think I smell bad. And then you're like, I want to go clean some crevices. I'm going to clean some cracks out. And that this is what it takes to come online, because we weren't born online. We rose out of the muck. To the left is the original humping rock. It's got a crevice. It's got a sacred vagina right there. Do you see my mouse? Unzip the sacred vagina. We will call it the Holy
sepulchre. Golgotha is at the split top of the sacred skull head. We will crucify our Lord on top of it. Oh, I'll stop.
But this is how do you keep church going? How do you notice that your congregation itself is like really sick of fucking syphilis? You, Peter, crucify yourself upside down. You go to Golgotha and crucify yourself upside down, which would mean you keep it in your pants. You keep it in your pants. Peter's gonna keep it in your pants. That's right. It starts the whole religion. Peter, gonna keep it in your pants. This whole thing works because you have no choice. You've got a crowd that is, are they pagan or are they anti-syphilis? Are they pagan or are they anti-syphilis? And a revolution took over because the society itself, most were not ready for this. They're like, but I wanna hump rocks. And the war came. The war came between the rock humpers and the not so rock humpers. And we're looking at that same war today. We're looking at the same thing. Here's what's underneath. Golgotha's rock. Look at its shape. See that? That's the shape. And this rock wasn't smashed. Do you know why Golgotha wasn't smashed? Because the people wouldn't came. Some of you are like, you mean come? Like, yeah, but I was trying to like make, yeah, it works both ways. The people, if you build it, the people will came. But this is, how else do I say this? Spermicus, littlecus, bigus, Spermicus, littlecus, bigotus. And then if you chop down littlest or bigotus, they're not gonna come. You're not gonna have a church anymore. What you've got to do is bury these things. You've got to bury those things and slowly develop something a little bit better. So you still have to worship Peter. You're going to need that word Peter. It's very important. You're going to need that word Peter. Not only that, all the people, all the cults are still humping rocks. They're humping walls. They're humping rocks. That's not going to stop. All you need to do is just invent a reason why. They're not humping rocks, James. You're anti-Semitic. Those guys are not humping that wall, James. They're not wall humpers. Yeah, they are. They're wall humpers because you and I are wall humpers. And I'm going to tell you something, guys. I want you to lean in here. Okay, I'll lean in because it's probably easier for me to lean in versus all of you guys lean in. I want you to lean in here. Bibi Netanyahu never kissed the rock. Never kissed the wall. The leader of the Benjamites has never kissed the wall. Every president has kissed the wall. Not Bibi Netanyahu. Why not? It's not his real name. You know that. That's not his real name. Benjamin's not his name. He chose that name because Benjamite is who he's working for, the Benjamites. This sacred rock is really important because the history of Priapus goes all the way back to Asherah. And I would speculate in a very perverted way that whenever a president goes over there and places their lips on that rock, they are tasting the ejaculation of the Benjamites. You could say this is the sickest, most anti-Semitic thing you've ever heard me say. And I would say it again because of the history of Priapus. Not only that, when you look at how the Benjamites are treating the Palestinians, you see a very diabolical form of worship that's based on creating a narrative in the world and causing someone to do something that's very degrading. Yeah. You know, that wall is obviously not even accurate, right? That that wall is not sacred to them. And it's not sacred to them because it's used as an instrument for this very purpose. Because when Christianity was invented, you now had an avenue for lust that was not being satisfied, which is why you would need to invent things like pornography. You would need to invent things like whorehouses, because the very foundation of the church is now built on abstinence for good reason, because the syphilis, man, it burns when you fucking pee. And if you cannot develop a social structure to help yourself survive through these times, you're going to have a really hard time. It's more than a hard time. It's going to burn when you pee when you have a hard time. And so the very sacred parts of your religion are now exploitable. They're exploitable. And there's really only one thing missing. The only thing missing is the truth. The Ka itself. The book of Samuel, the Ark of the Covenant, was stored at Kiryat Yearim for 20 years after it was returned to the Israelites by the Philistines, who had captured it in battle, and their dismay was smitten with the disease. Why were they still smitten with the disease? We stole their ark. We stole their ark. Why are we not smitten? Why are we still smitten? We have their power source. And that power source was the knowledge of nunnery. It was the knowledge of cleanliness. It was the knowledge of the sacred whore. You treat the sacred whore like a sacred virgin, and it doesn't burn when you pee. This is the oldest religion that you and I would be able to equate to modern Christianity. That if we can treat the sacred whore like the sacred virgin, it will not burn when we pee. This is the most rudimentary proto-form of Christianity you will ever find, and it has nothing to do with what you've been told, because the shame of what it takes to look back in history is too much. And God bless those lesbians, because they documented all 4,000 of those phalluses in stone and wrote it down and said, this is the truth, even though this was a disgusting trip for us and will never be the same. And stop asking us about the one missing phallus. I told you there was only 3,999. This is the temple of the rising snake in your pants. You would drop your anchor, guys. You drop your anchor on the wet, wild Gorgon sister island. These things are realer than we think, because the birth of religion was something that happened long before we even had a word for it. That it wasn't until about 300 AD, I'm almost positive that's correct, that we started calling it religio, that Cicero coined that term. BC, I think. And so you understand that the pedophilia is built into the church, because the sacred idea of what brings people together is where the sex is. And if you're going to have a church that venerates being a virgin, then to reach that virginity to its umpteenth level means you're going to start worshiping pedophilia. These are the leaders. The pedophiles technically are the leaders of a church that's worshiping what is considered virgin. There's nothing more virgin than youth. And so if you're building a golden temple that calls the holiest of you above the law, or a conduit to the law, they would feel their power by partaking of the one thing that no one else could. And this is the pedophilia. So the humping of these rocks is still around today. The ritual where people are asked to debase themselves in public is still here today, because that gets you off. If you're a Benjamite and you've been practicing terror for years, that's going to get you off. That's going to feel so good that you're going to want to keep doing that again and again and again. And if you are living inside of religion that has made you susceptible to your addiction to sex, and the only thing you can cling to is how clean you are when you're not, and you're still meeting people on Grindr, you're still partaking in things that you think you should not, you're thinking maybe you're you're a homosexual or someone else is, and that these deep tremors that are inside of you are looking for a way to get out, which is why I brought this up talking about franchisement. That this would truly be the heart of what it's like to franchise something. And this is just Christian nationalism, isn't it? I mean, ultimately, that's really all it is. So why do white men have no ka? What is it about white men and their lack of ka? And I want to go over that. Ka is sort of the root in the mud of the flower that you would call a lotus. This is who you are. This is Egyptian. Spiritual duplicate, stored in the heart. At death, separated from the body. Inhabits a tomb, requires food, clothing, perfume, furniture. Your ka needs all those things. Ba is your flower. It's the flower above the surface. It floats on the water. It looks really pretty. It looks like it's the entire thing. You would look at a lotus, and some of you might think, oh, look at that. That's the entire thing. But no, it's got a umbilical cord. And that umbilical cord is going all the way down into the mud. And the root ball that feeds that ba is your ka. This is your complete life. And ancient Egypt invented the concept of Horus because of ka. Just like a lotus, you too have a stalk. Some of you may not even remember that. Some of you are like, I don't have a stalk, but you did. Some of you have innies and some of you have outies. And that innie or that outie used to be connected to the stalk. And that stalk used to be planted in your placenta. It used to be a part of who you are. And the Valley of the Kings, a place that you've probably heard, west of Luxor in the hills, the Wedget, is the Valley of the Kings. And you think that that's where rich people are buried. And I don't know if you know what rich people means, because rich people, that place actually means the Valley of the Gates of Kings. And gates is plural. They don't see king as singular. And those tombs that we think are people trying to hide their kings from certain places, if most of them, they're not hidden at all. They weren't meant to be hidden at all. They didn't have elaborate locks or doors. In fact, most of them had shutters that had little trim pieces that allowed you to move and replace the wood whenever you wanted. And if you walked in, you would find that the Valley of the Kas is occupied by rows of jars. Clay jars. And if you were to walk up to one of those clay jars and open the lid, you would see a placenta inside. And one of the most sacred rituals, the cutting of the cord, actually came from this Horus. See, that placenta was the Horus. It was the one that always lives above the horizon, the one that's always on the opposite side of life than you are, the one that gave its only body, its only begotten sense so that you may live. It's the first concept of Jesus. Your ka should be buried in a place that can be venerated. And as long as your ka is there, the spirit of you, your ba, has a place to remember who it is and what it's about. Native Americans, without going to Egypt, practice the same ritual. Many would bury their ka underneath an evergreen tree, at the base of an evergreen tree somewhere. These things were almost like a plug-in hard drive. The same way that bone technology was used by ancient pagans that would crawl underground to sleep among the bones simply to remember. Their phonological loop was so weak that they needed the technology of furniture, of bone furniture, to exist and remember an identity before the world where we had three names, before the world where we can complexify ourselves into something beyond slave. and that the Egyptians were utilizing the Valley of the Kings as gates, and that these gates stored in this valley were used to keep their Ka. White man has no Ka. White man has no Ka. When I was born, my Ka was placed in an incinerator. It was a Holocaust. It was burned in an instant. No one was told. No one was asked. No one even watched it. It was obliterated, and I've spent my entire life as a white man because of that. And Zionists invented the word white man. They invented the idea of amputating the Ka. Because if you could amputate that Ka, you would have a skinwalker. A skinwalker that looks for the certification of tattooed trees to give him some sense of rights, some sense of law. And that the people that call themselves white people, I am one of them, or have been, are people that have lost their Ka. That the right answer is that you are indigenous. And you would be indigenous if someone would have planted your Ka. And if that Ka was planted somewhere, you would find it impossible to even use the word immigrant or citizen. That citizen would be meaningless to you because you would have Ka. This Ka would give you all the power you need. And anyone that would want to control society would find a way to kill that Ka. And any kind of religion or idea that tried to tap into that Ka would be shamed exclusively. Which brings us back to disenfranchisement. The disenfranchisement runs on the lack of Ka. And as long as people do not have Ka, they will seek it from somewhere else. The Egyptians had 5 different names for things. I don't even want to show you this. It's so complicated. I'm not going to show you. They had your name. This was your cartouche. Your written name was the reason why it's bound in twine is because it's sealing you together. It is that twine, believe it or not, is symbolic of your umbilical, your spout connecting your Ka from your Ba. And that your name, the cartouche of who you were, is the seal for that. It is the naming convention. It's an IP address in the giant computer of Ma'at. Your soul is your Ba. Your spirit is your Ka. Your body is the shell. And your shadow or your swit is your privileges. This is a horrible computer analogy that only you would understand if you programmed in shell. But that you have root access to your body. And that your shadow gives you root privileges that you may not have normally as your body. That you would have to go in and type su-root or open Windows PowerShell in administrator mode. And that if you enter your root password, then you really are utilizing your shadow. So your body is your shell, your spirit or your Ka is really your PID. Oh God, don't do that. Ugh. Programming ID is sort of like, James, stop it. You're gonna kill them all. Don't do that. Don't do that. The Valley of the Gates of Kings, though. Valley of the Gates of Kings. Why hide 62 dead pharaohs in the exact same valley as the last guy? This is the question I ask. Here's Luxor Temple. It's a 10-kilometer walk if you follow the road to get there. And so the Temple of Man is purposely right next to, on the other side, it's very important, Horus is on the other side of the Nile. The Nile is life itself. Horus is on the other side, and he's at the top of the mountain because Horus is above you. Just like your placenta is above you and you're suspended from the cord of your placenta, So too is your Ka stored in the valley of the kings. And this is a wedget, which means a runoff. That's the word for runoff. This valley of the kings is more than a valley. It actually dumps energy, psychic energy, falls through the valley of the kings, filters around its ridges. Through the tomb of Ramses was one of these places, wrapped around the mortuary temple of Seti I, and poured itself into the Nile at Karnak and Luxor. And that this concept is such a crucial concept, and it's been stolen by the same people who stole the religion of Egypt. James, nobody stole the religion of Egypt. Everybody's got... That's not true. That the Temple of Luxor, as we discussed, has the symbol, these symbolic chambers of the Holy of Holies, the holy place, and then the outer temple itself. And that one would enter into Luxor the same way one would enter into Solomon's temple or the tabernacle in the wilderness. And that if you were a slave cult learning your religious ideas through Egypt, but you were secretly humping poles, Yahweh stones, and that you found yourself to be so rebellious that the Pharaoh himself said, "You're fucking fired," and he deported you, that you would become a wandering tribe of disenfranchised, and that you would rob the religion from whence you came and create it and call it your own. You would utilize the sacred shofar horn because you would have slaughtered their sacred ram at Elephantine. And in the revolts at Elephantine, you see the sacred Baphomet himself, the symbol of ancient Egypt, of Amun-Ra, of Khnum, of Ben-Ebjedet, of Daksha, of Pan itself, emerging from the Nile Valley, showing you this concept of fertility, that you would fight against that, hoard it as your own, never mention the pyramids in the Bible, and create a sacred cult where only you knew what was inside the Holy of Holies. And that never happened in Egypt. That on Yom Kippur in Luxor, everyone got to see. And in Yom Kippur in the Jewish tradition, only the high priest gets to see. This is a covenant of secrecy, and a covenant of secrecy will show itself by making white men with no Ka kiss the very rock that they hump on. And to denigrate and show themselves to be so much lower than them that it would be a form of worship and a form of power. And if you have stolen the sacred shofar from the temples of Egypt, you would be forced to run. You'd be forced to make your own ark. You'd be forced to carry the bones of what you consider to be your most sacred patriarch, and to tell stories about how Christianity can still worship the phallus by turning it into 2 stones and the rod of Aaron and a bowl of semen. A bowl of manna. And when you notice that the people who feared syphilis more than they feared developing an ability to say no, when you notice that they bought it, you would feel that you were superior. You would feel that you had the ability to manipulate these creatures. You would notice how easy it is to tame them. You would notice when you take their Ka away by creating an American Medical Association that there is a psychic desire to delete the Ka itself, that everyone is on board with let's incinerate Horus. Let's remove the one thing that gave its life so that we can be here. When you give birth at Luxor, you lay down in the south. And when the baby comes, the sacred placenta, the water hasn't broken. That's so important. And that water is pulled to the north, and the cord is stretched to look like the Nile. And when you understand how the Nile flows, you understand that the mother is Africa now, and that she's feeding all of her blood is pulsing through the cord. It's coming from Horus itself. So Isis and Horus are giving birth to the new king, and the new king doesn't know who it is. It's Osiris. And all the history, the palette of Narmer, one of the oldest makeup palettes we found, shows you this sacred placenta being drugged. It shows you how crucially important it was to Egypt. And just like the shofar, it would show you how crucially it would be important for the Benjamites to make the fuck sure no one could ever access their Horus. It would be a deep, deep part of their religion. Wadi al-Waq al-Maluk is the watercourse that is dry except during periods of rainfall. Why would you bury your king in a place that literally says, well, this is a watercourse, it's kind of dry, but not when it rains? And that the only reason why you would want to bury your Ka there is because you would want the rain of Horus to bequeath this sacred juice and pull forth the salt and wash it down into the Nile so you could be reborn, so you could be fed. This is the real meaning of the Valley of the Gates of Kings, ladies and gentlemen. And how important it is to hump that rock. You guys need to get out there and hump more rocks, man. And I want you to ask the tree for consent, okay? Don't do what I did. Don't do it. You will live in shame for the rest of your life. Ask the tree for consent. And if she says yes, I want you to hump that rock, ladies and gentlemen. I want you to bring the Asherah, and I want you to think about your Ka. I want you to apologize for the incineration. Tell it, I did not know what I meant, Horus. And the Horus, the sacred Horus, she knows what happened. She knows what you did. She knows what you mean. She appreciates you finally remembering. Wadi means the channel of a watercourse that is dry except during rainfall. The Valley of the Kings is Arabic, Wadi al-Muluk, in Coptic, Romanized Dazim. Lake Coptic is also known as the Valley of the Gates of Kings. Just wanted you to know that. You're listening to James True. To me, these are like antenna. They're like Ka veins. It's an overhead view. These are Ka veins. And you can see how they're situated, that they're meant to be accessed. That the Valley of Bibun, Malok, right here is sort of like a subdivision. And that all of these gates of kings are stored in the subdivision in easy to access places. This is a neighborhood, a birthing neighborhood for your Horus. Yeah, Excalibur is so true. Guys, there's an Excalibur in your pants. Didn't know if I told you that. And if you pull it out of the rock, do you understand what Oman just did? The Excalibur is the Peter inserted into the rock so that England can be born. All 12 of your cranial nerves have now been subdued because the power of humping compels you, because it burns when you pee. But until you can master your kundalini, do you see how easy this is, guys? It all falls into place when you think about it. If you master your kundalini, you do not need to shame your snake. You notice that the snake was the birth of your power the whole time. What scares you is that it burns when you pee. And it scares you because you will not recognize the sacred virgin. You will not abstain during the month of Pisces. You will not abstain, which is the meaning of the word nun, this sacred fish time, where all is clean. If you show that, you will have your cake and eat it too. This is why Thebes means scepter, wasit. The scepter, but no, not the phallic scepter, that Egypt itself, if you want to know the truth of what Priapus is, it's really the worship of the lotus. Isn't Priapus the worship of the lotus? That you have at the root something underwater, it's deep in the mud, a desire, an urge, and the urge sprouts forth, and the sprout rises until the surface, until it flowers in a beautiful white thing. And this flower gives birth to consciousness and all creation. The scepter itself is the lotus that looks like a staff. Luxor Temple, Ipet Resit, unlike the other temples in Thebes, is not dedicated to a cult or god or deified version of the king. Instead, it is dedicated to the rejuvenation of kingship. It may have been where many of the pharaohs of Egypt were crowned. It is a centerpiece of the Opet festival, where the sacred barge of the Theban triad travels from Karnak to Luxor, What is the Theban triad? The Father, the Son, the Holy Ghost is Adam and Eve and your dead Horus. That the placenta dies so that you can be born. Horus dies so you can be born. This is the original Trinity. And it was brought down on a barge and walked into Luxor Temple. And on that one day, if you were worshiping in Egypt, you got to see. This is the principle of potlatch. Hey, come over. I'm going to show you my gold. Oh, shit, man. You never show your gold. Yep. But I like you. I trust you. I'm going to show you your gold. Then you go over there and you realize it's just a bunch of porno magazines. And you're like, why are you doing this? He's like, because I like it when someone watches me. I like it. That's why awakening, the awakening is the finding of this self, that you cease to be a puppet of the state. You've tapped into the core, the root, the ka of who you are. And you're no longer made of wood. You're made of the spirit inside of it. And that you would die so that your body would be born too, really. That's what's happening. These are ancient memories stored, kept, because there's a spirit that's still alive. These people are still alive. These mummies are still alive. Thutmose III is still alive. And one day when we've tapped into the true power of what AI will bring. I know, I'm sorry, I shouldn't call it that because a lot of you guys are like, fuck AI and the horse rode it on. And I know, but eventually when AI comes online and all you guys stop spooging about it, you're going to understand that Thutmose III is going to have a sacred avatar that everyone in the world agrees on because it's probably built by Egypt or by the descendant, whatever. We're going to decide this is the authority on Thutmose III. And when you have that, every single piece of history that's ever been found about Thutmose III will be placed into an AI, and that motherfucker will be animated. And he will be animated precisely because his Ka is still here. That your carcass is your Ka too. And that your Ka has a cartouche on the tombstone. Why am I yelling? I have no idea. I hope you're enjoying it, though. Who the fuck knows? Why do these temples have long hallways? Why would you shape it like an antenna? I think originally they had long hallways to make room. That everyone needed room to keep their jar, and so the hallway naturally got deeper. And what they were doing was really building an antenna, an electrical conduit to remember who the fuck you were. And the more special that hole was underground, the more power it has as an antenna in your mind because you remembered it. You were there. You were there. Sometimes the Ka's not enough, so you'll have a new Shapti. And you'll make this out of wax and it will serve as the same purpose. And you'll give it a little pee-pee because it turns you on. You'll rub it. You rub it for luck. People will be like, we must make a decision. You'll be like, let me rub my penis for luck. And people are like, hey, don't do it in the boat. He's like, no, I meant by my Shabi. They're like, oh. All right. That's fine, I guess. And then you're watching him jack off a wax doll and you're driving the boat and you're like, why is this better? Why is this? Why did I say it was okay? And you do that because society has all these things. It wants all these things. Crowley, so big into sex magic. Don't you think this is where the Silver Star of Sirius came from? Do you see the AA? This would be the one sacred artifact that tied Egypt and Priapus into one. And if you're worshiping light cakes, if you're walking around going, oh God, we're going to have a sacred sex ritual, you're going to be tapping into this stuff. You're going to find out this stuff. Right? You find out this stuff. Astana, Kazakhstan 22. I really wish you put it in the comments. We can't always say what's on the chat. It's kind of weird what I have to do. It'd be great if we had more comments. So if you put it in the comments, I will definitely see it. I almost never can come back and go through the comments. I wish I was better at that, but there's just so much to do, you know? So I do want to learn more though. I won't talk to you about all the different hours, but Horus, of course, means hour itself. And there's this sacred ritual you go over where you cross the sea and stuff. But I think I've probably given you enough for today. I hope you enjoyed the show. Did I really cover the idea of disenfranchisement? Because right now, a lot of people are ashamed of white disenfranchisement. And I think they're ashamed of that because they don't have Ka. They feel deep down they don't deserve to have a Ka because they incinerated it. One of the biggest powers you can find is to stop saying they and say, I incinerated it. I killed my own Horus. First thing I did when I was born is I let people kill my Horus. And Horus was dead. That guy was alive for a while, had sort of a heartbeat, had its own neurons, had its own thoughts, had its own algorithms, I should say. And these algorithms, you came here to be a white man. I think one of the most powerful things that could happen in this civil war, in this Aquarian civil war, would be for you to utilize the fact that something's missing and find it again. I don't think you realize what a blessing this is. I don't think you realize how special it is to be a white disenfranchised man. I use man for both, sorry. That disenfranchisement is some of the most advanced psychic work you can do because you're tapping into a phantom limb, and that phantom limb is real. It's true. And you know that, and you will fulfill its shape in your mind by feeling disenfranchised. By allowing that feeling to happen, you end up restoring the golden cord. James, what do you mean restoring golden? That kind of sounds like Isis, like putting a gold phallus back on Osiris. Yeah, it is, because the original Horus, do I have this slide here? I don't. The original Horus and Mem, I think, were confused. Mem is this Egyptian god of the heart on. It's usually like a black figure. He's got like a giant schlong. And then you've got Horus, and Horus kind of looks like men, but the only thing different is that the schlong is actually where his belly button is. And when it's where his belly button is, you can see how Egyptians forgot its sacred knowledge. And it forgot its sacred knowledge because the priests weren't telling it to everybody. And as each civilization, as each dynasty collapses, Horus turns from the sacred placenta into a hawk, into time itself, into an avenging creature that avenges his own father's death. And it's spoiled into a case of war. It becomes a warlike symbol, the same way all of our gods turn from female into male, that it's saltified itself, that it's solidified itself in some way. And so there's kind of a natural progression of the shaming of the Priapus and turning it into something else. And then even before Priapus came, realizing that we pulled the Priapus out, that we were ready for Muladhara. We were ready for that root chakra so that we could start playing with it. A few weeks ago, I told you guys about the Horus locks, and that how, just like the rock humpers, the Benjamites keep Horus locks, but they don't know it's the placenta. That the original Pharaoh would wear his hair like this to remind him of his placenta, of his Ka. Horus was on his shoulder. And that the Jewish lore didn't even know what this meant. And if they would have known what this meant, they would only have one lock, but they have two. They have two because they're trying to emulate a religion that they know is better, that they know is their master, and that they feel rebuke because they were turned away, the same thing that happened to Cain. And that this turning away is one of the most crucial things Isis has ever did to restore Osiris, that she turned these people away so she could rebuild Osiris. And the only way she rebuilds Osiris is waiting for you to show up and create the phantom limb, sympathy, compassion, and remember that you're pleomorphic, and grow that bitch back again. Let's do that. Have a great day.